G'day everybody and welcome to another episode of Automotive Carnage. In today's episode we continue work on our S13 Silvia manual conversion because we have flywheel bolts. The right ones this time. Okay, so let's carry on work with our S13 manual conversion. Now at the end of part 1 we were going really well until we found out that the wrecker unfortunately has sent me the wrong flywheel bolts. They were the right length but they were not the right pitch, so they would not screw in. So express postage, which still took a week in our current climate, got some ARP flywheel bolts which will do a fantastic job of what we need to do. Now we're going to carry on with where we're up to, but there's a couple little handy tips that I want to share with you first that I forgot to mention in the first one. The first one being fairly important, and that's to do with the cross members for the actual gearbox itself. Now in the last episode I mentioned that there is a type A, a type B and a type C. You can easily denote that by what is stamped right here in the middle. It'll have an A, B or C on it, obviously. Now the automatics, easy to remember, it comes with an A, and the manuals come with the B. Now as you can see, put that one down for now, that there is a height difference between either side, and they're both kind of a U shape in a way, if you can picture that. But with the manual one, because of the height difference, the U shape faces the opposite way. So again, that is the manual one. So you can't just flip that around because the height difference of where it actually mounts up to the chassis will be different. So you are going to have to chop that up, make it work, I don't know how, or just go out and find yourself a type B cross member. Right, the other thing is to do with the sandwich plates. Now I was under the impression that there were two different kinds between the automatic and the manual. There is not. I believe that is with the KA series engine from the 240 SXs in the States. As you can see, I have here both a manual and an automatic transmission sandwich plate, and they line up absolutely perfect. They are exactly the same. So for my conversion, I'm going to use the one I ordered anyway, because it's off a S14 I think, and it's just in better condition than the one I took off. I kind of bent that getting it out. Right, and the last thing I want to mention is actually underneath the car itself. This here is the radiator, and this is the transmission cooler line. So the transmission cooler is built into the factory radiator, and this pipe here normally loops around and goes down the driver's side of the engine, along with that line, which is obviously one's a return and one's a feed. So once you've taken those out, which can be a little bit troublesome, what you need to do is then grab the longest of the rubber hoses once you've taken the hard lines out, and then as you can see here, I've just looped it around, and that just creates a nice closed loop on the trans cooler, and no need to change the radiator or anything like drastic like that. So I think that's everything. Now we can continue work on the actual transmission, and as you can see, my engine sump is very dirty. Anyway, to the transmission. Okay, second time's the charm. Let's hope this works this time. So first we want to put our sandwich plate on, locating it on the dowels. There we go. That's on, and that looks wonderful. Now for the heavy sucker. Line your bolt holes up. Wonderful. Alright. Now, ARP recommend a little bit of Loctite on the thread itself, and then they supply you with some assembly lube to put underneath the head. Okay. Moment of truth. Ah, so much easier. That is the correct flywheel bolt. Okay, and so I'm going to do that, what's that, 8 times, and I'll come back to you once I'm ready to tighten them up. Okay, so once you got all your bolts in, again make sure you've got some thread locker on there. You don't want them winding themselves out and having to back in here and redo this job, or causing serious damage to your car. Now, these are ARP ones, so obviously being American made, the best socket I can find to fit is a 5/8. And they recommend a torque setting of 70 foot-pounds. Now, in saying that, if you're using standard Nissan stuff, follow standard Nissan instructions. Just because these are 70 foot-pounds doesn't mean that Nissan is. I don't know what they are. You have to do your research on that one. But for ARP, they're recommending 70 foot-pounds. But they come with instructions, so literally follow the instructions. Alright, let's tighten these up. Oh, bugger. I forgot we need a friend for this part. Okay, so for those of you who are playing along at home by yourselves like I am, all you need, you don't need a friend, all you need is a 1 inch and 1/16 socket. I don't know why I'm using all Imperial, but that just happens to fit the nicest out of the sockets I have. On the end of a breaker bar, rotate this till it jams up against the caster rod, and then that gives you enough strength to hold the engine from rotating. Well, you go in a alternating pattern, or crisscross pattern, and do up your flywheel bolts. Click. Cool. So once you've got them all, just go around. I like to double check that I haven't missed one, and that each one has the right click. See, missed one. Always double check. There we go. Bloody hell, I'm glad I checked that. Now, clean our surface up. I need to give this one another clean. Make sure you've got clean hands, so I need to go clean them up or put some gloves on. Cleanliness is the next step, and then clutch kit. Awesome, time to put a clutch in. Okay, there we go. That surface is clean. Again, with your clean hands or gloves, try not to touch too much. Now, these are really handy because they actually have written on them which way around they go. So this says gearbox side, so that faces out from the engine block. Now, get our alignment tool here, work that bad boy in there, and now we'll get our pressure plate, which has already been cleaned up separately. Try to line these holes up a little bit. There we go. It's on the locating dowels, so just give it a little bit of convincing. Right, read your instructions for your pressure plate bolts. Again, I've gone with ARP. Yeah, with the pressure plate ones, don't forget the washer. A little bit of lube, again, a little bit of Loctite. Anyway, we'll get them all in finger tight and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've got all my pressure plate bolts in with their washers and their Loctite and everything. Now before I go about giving them their correct torque spec, I'm just going around with a normal ratchet and just little bit by little bit on each one. Again, in an alternating pattern. Just start to bring in the pressure plate. You don't want to do up all the bolts on one side and work your way around, because then it twists it and makes it uneven and it can cock in place and it just doesn't work out well. So the best way I've found to do it is just go that one, 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 and just go back and forth until you get to a point where it's all flat. Every face should be touching the face of the flywheel, and then you can go about doing your actual torque settings. Alright, now time to bust out the torque wrench and do them up in a crisscross pattern to our specified torque rating. Again, depending on what kind of bolts you've used, it will be different. And now we should be able to pull the pin. That clutch flywheel is ready to go. Yes! Oh, that is so good. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is actually lift the gearbox up and into place. But I actually am going to need a friend for that. So that's all I can do for under here now. Let's move on to the wiring and let's see if we can get that one right. Okay, wiring. This does my head in every time. It's the worst part of working on the vehicle in my opinion. But anyway, there are only two things that need to be wired up for an S13 manual conversion. So this is our automatic wiring loom. This is the transmission side. So these cables run off to the actual transmission itself. Now the main one we need is this big sucker here, right? He's a big connector and he's got two cables attached to him. A hefty black one and a big tan one. Now with this one, this is to trick the automatic ECU into thinking the car is always in park, therefore it will always start. So with this one, it's easy. All we need to do is cut it and then twist them together, cap them off so they're tight and secure and safe. Job done. Car's always in park according to the automatic ECU, and we won't have any trouble starting it. Now the second one's a little bit trickier because there's so many wires and I've read so many different forums that recommend different wires and it's a bit awkward. But I've narrowed it down to this grey plug. Now this grey plug, I'll show you where it plugs into on the fuse box side. But what we need is the one green wire that's in here and the one black wire. Now we're going to take those two wires and extend them down to the reverse switch on the manual transmission. So what all that's going to look like on the actual car side of that wiring is down here we have our connector that our park switch will be on. So that's the one that will tell the ECU that we're always in park. Right, that's just kind of floating, for my car at least, it was floating on the bottom. It's not actually really connected to anything. But again, it's only got those two massive black and tan colored wires going to it. Now as for the reverse switch, we need this middle one here. So you got a tiny one on top, medium sized grey one, and then a brown connector. We want this tan one. We want this grey one. Which colours it is on this side, I'm not too sure. Hence why I showed you the transmission side loom first. So looking for that green and that black wire, and I'm going to extend those down to the reverse switch. And lastly, on the manual transmission side of things, this forward switch, that is our reverse switch. The rear one is the neutral switch, which in our application we don't need because we're still running the automatic ECU and automatic loom. So that one can stay disconnected. But these are the wires that we need to tap into to connect our reverse switch. Now it doesn't matter which one you connect the green one to or which one you connect the black one to, because it's just an open circuit and we need to close it when it goes into reverse. So connect those two wires up to here, use a connector of some sort, I highly recommend it, so that when you drop this gearbox again you can just unplug it. And lastly we have our speed sensor, and that connector is exactly the same as the automatic one, so that will plug into where you just connected it in the first place. Right, that's enough explaining the wiring. That's all we need to do. Let's do it. There we go. That's what you should end up with. Hopefully you're able to use a bit longer cabling though. Right, so that is to trick the ECU. Now onto the reverse switch. Okay, so this is really cool. We've just found out that these are the correct cables, which I wasn't quite 100% sure on. So say second plug down, we want the black one and the green one. Now you're applying power, connect these together. That's my reverse sensor, and if we go to the back, you'll be able to see the lights working. So there we go. Next job. Okay, so next we need to put our new throw-up bearing on our throw-up bearing carrier. So crack open your nice new bearing. This face here that rotates, that faces towards the pressure plate. So this flat surface here is what will be mating the other side of this. So that slides onto there. Get yourself a mallet, put a forward tube, balance nice and evenly. Couple of gentle hits, and make sure it goes on even. There we go. So once you've got that all bashed on, rotates nicely, nice and level. You can put that back inside our bow housing. Right, so here we are back underneath the car. The transmission's ready to go. Now, handy little tip. I like to loosely mount the crossmember onto the actual gearbox so that when I get up into position we can put the bolts in nice and easy. And also remove the shifter. I just tried pulling it up with the shifter in there and you just don't have enough room. So remove the shifter, makes it a lot easier. Anyway, I'm going to now put that up in place and then I'll bring you back once it's done. Alright, so fast forward a few hours and 3 strong blokes and our manual transmission is finished. It is in. We've bolted all up at the Crossmember. We've put our dry shaft back in. Everything is up and running as it should be. So, what do you need to actually get that gearbox up into place? Well, you need 3 strong blokes. You can do it with 2. You can't do it by yourself, but 3 is ideal. 1 to hold the bell housing, 1 to hold the rear of the transmission, and the 3rd to put the bolts in. Use your jack to help get it up into position, and then a couple of guys to get it up, because as you lift it up, you've got to lift it straight up, so straight up and then in. It's a bit of a tight fit in there. It takes a bit of wriggling because of the input shaft, trying to get the splines lined up, but it does go eventually. It can be a bugger though. So, a couple of strong blokes, don't try to do it by yourself. I did, it went wrong. So there we have it, the car runs beautifully. And I can tell you, after a few test drives down to Mexico and back, this car runs like a charm. It is absolutely wonderful. The 5-speed really makes this car come alive, and it fixes my issue of the torque converter being absolutely shattered in the original setup. So, that's it, a 2-part series on how to change your automatic SR20 S13 Silvia to a 5-speed manual. I hope it helps you out. I probably have done things different to how others have done it. As I said, this is the first time I've done it, but it's worked out beautifully here, and this car is now ready to go for an inspection and get its road legal plates. So, that's what you'll see next time on this car. As for the next episode of Automotive Carnage, who knows what we'll get up to. We'll catch you then.